Hi, this is Terry from Tree Marie Soapworks. Today I'm going to show you how to make this bar. It's a Taiwan swirl, but there's two different ways I'm going to cut it to show you two different patterns you can make, and also I show a different tool that I made from a suggestion from one of my subscribers named Christopher. Stick with me to the end and I go over a what I learned section on how I could have made this bar better yet. Let's get started. First, I use about a third of my water weight in distilled water ice cubes. I do that mainly to cut down on fumes. I top off the remaining water weight with cold distilled water. Next, I measure my sodium hydroxide and I carefully add that to my distilled water. I stir that until it's dissolved, and then I measure my sodium lactate. I set these aside in a well-ventilated area that's safe from any children or pets. After I get those so they're cooling, I start to measure my hard oils, and for this one I'm just starting with my coconut oil. I start microwaving my coconut oil in 30-second bursts, but in the meantime, while I'm doing that, I start measuring my liquid oils, starting with my avocado oil, and then my castor oil, and then finally my olive oil. Next, I measure my fragrance, and today I'm using Black Raspberry Vanilla from Wholesale Supplies Plus. It's a very well behaved fragrance. Now that my coconut oil is melted, I'm going to add my cocoa butter pastilles. I stir those until they're melted, and if they don't melt by stirring, I just microwave them until they're just barely melted. Okay, now that my oils are cooling, I'm going to get started on my colors. First, we have Pretty in Pink, and it's from Elements Bath & Body, and I use that at a rate of 0.5 teaspoons per pound of oils. To get a light pink, I'm adding titanium dioxide also, and I'm adding that at a rate of 0.25 teaspoons per pound of oils. I pre-dilute my titanium dioxide, 1 part titanium dioxide to 3 parts of olive oil. So for the next color is the white, and I am just using pre-diluted titanium dioxide, like I said before, and I'm using it at a rate of 1 teaspoon per pound of oils. It's easy to use the colorant calculator that Elements Bath & Body has because it will tell you how much pre-diluted colorant you need in teaspoons and in tablespoons. Next, I'm using Ultramarine Blue, and it's also from Elements Bath & Body, and I'm using it at a rate of 0.75 teaspoons per pound of oils. Since I'm trying to make a navy blue, I'm also using Smooth Coconut Carbon, also called Activated Charcoal, and I'm using that at a rate of 0.1875, which is also 3/16 of a teaspoon. If you're putting these colorants into the Elements colorant calculator, you can just go to the very bottom one. You're splitting your batter into thirds, so you're going to use for the percentage part 33.3. And for this recipe, the oils are 33.5. So I have those two numbers, and then I just put my rates in there. Like if I'm using 1 teaspoon per pound of oils, like I do for the titanium dioxide, then I put that in and I just click calculate, and then it'll give me the answer of how much I need. But then also under that, it gives me the answer of how much I need diluted for the titanium dioxide in teaspoons and tablespoons. Next, I'm just adding my liquid oils to my melted hard oils, and I stir them until they're completely clear. After that, I add my fragrance. If my fragrance wasn't a well-behaved fragrance, I wouldn't be adding it now, but since it is, I just add it to my oils. It's much faster. Now that my lye water and my oils have cooled to temperatures between 85 and 95 degrees Fahrenheit, I add my sodium lactate to my lye water, and then I strain it into my oils. Next, I weigh my bowl and the contents, and then I subtract off the weight of the bowl that I recorded earlier, and then I divide that number by 3. At this point, I usually stir with a spatula for a little bit just to see what my batter's going to do, if it's going to speed up or if it's just going to remain fluid. And if it seems like it's not going to speed up, I use my stick blender and blend it to emulsion. An emulsion is reached when all of these liquids are dispersed equally. There's no oils floating on the top. At this point, I just use the number that I calculated before and I split my batter into 3 parts. Next, I add my colorants and I just make sure that they are completely mixed in. I just give my batter a little bit of a stick blend before I'm ready to pour it because it just seems a little too thin at this point. When my batter was at light trace, I poured my batter and I make sure and hold down my dividers so none of it seeps underneath. When I'm working with dividers, I usually pour enough in each of the sections to cover the bottom and then I pour the remaining batter. Next, I remove my dividers and I have this tool that I made and it was a suggestion from Christopher. These are called skinny sticks and I used a popsicle stick to go in between and I taped them together and then put plexiglass on each side of them. This gave me some other ideas because you could use it for a peacock swirl in a slab mold. I actually made 2 of these and I put them in the oven to force gel, and I did it like I normally do. I just preheated the oven to its lowest temperature and then I put my soap in and covered it, and then once I put my soap in, I turned the oven off and I put the oven light on and I shut my oven and I just leave it there overnight, and then I turn my oven light off and let it come to room temperature naturally, and then I cut it in another 24 hours. You see here that the batter kind of went under one of my partitions, and so this is the one I'm going to cut horizontally. The other one came out better, so that's the one I'm going to cut vertically. I'm just planing off the sides. These need a little planing just to fit in my boxes. While I still have this in one piece, I'm going to go ahead and bevel the 4 long edges. Next, I'm going to divide the long length of the loaf into 3 pieces. And to get this into 3 equal pieces, I use an architect scale, and I'm using the 1/4 inch scale. And so I'm looking for a number that's a little bit bigger than the length of my mold that divides by 3. And I use 42. So I put one end of my ruler on the 0 and the other end on the 42. And I divide 42 by 3 and I get 14. So I use 14 and I make a mark there, and 28. And this is how we're going to be cutting this to get the stripe effect. So I'm doing the same thing here. I'm dividing this by 3. So I find a number that's divisible by 3 that's a little bit bigger than the width of the bar. So in this case, I'm using a 15, and so I divide 15 by 3, and then I mark it every 5. So I mark it at the 5 and the 10. I'm going to start the What I Learned section of this video. These striped bars didn't come out quite as I had hoped. I've done this technique before and I made a tutorial for Elements Bath & Body and they came out so good. The bar was black and purple and white, and there was a nice thin stripe of black and a thin stripe of purple, and the white was in between. The difference is that in the one that I made for Elements Bath & Body, my batter got a little thick. Actually, I thought it was getting too thick, but I think that helped, and I think that would have made for a nicer stripe. I should have just been patient, or I should have stick blended this a little more to get it to a thicker consistency. It kind of goes back to what I was saying in my last video about waiting on your soap. Also, I think you have to be very careful that no batter goes underneath your dividers, and I think in the other one, since my batter was a little thicker, it didn't do that. So next time, I guess I would get my batter a little bit thicker, because I really want to make this technique again. That little skinny stripe is just so neat. It baffles your mind how you can make a stripe that thin in soap. This is one of the side bars. The middle bar would have the opposite effect on the other side. It'll have a thick black stripe with a skinny purple stripe. For the next one, I'm cutting horizontally, and you've seen me do this plenty of times, but I'm going to cut one bar off the end. And I do that because I don't want to divide this by 10. I want to divide this by 9 because 10 bars just makes a little 2-inch bar, and to me that's just too short of a bar. Proportionally, it doesn't look right. So I want it to be a little bit taller than 2 inches. So I'm cutting one bar off vertically, and then I cut the rest into 8 bars horizontally. Another thing that I need to remember is to make sure and use something a little soft under my mold. And I did that this time, but I did another one that you haven't seen that I used a cutting board underneath, and it was rigid and it was harder to get those sections in your dividers closed off. So I used a piece of foam board in this, and I think that worked pretty good. If you don't have dividers and want to make your own, I made mine and I made a tutorial showing how I did it. So if you're interested, I have a link to the tutorial at the end of this video. If you're interested in this recipe, it's a palm-free recipe and I have it down in the description below. If you don't know how to put it in soap calc, I have some tutorials on that too. And I have links to them as well, and also my tools that I used, I have links to those. So just check out the description below. I just recently started a Facebook group that's for asking questions about soap making and sharing and encouraging others with soap making. And it's a closed group and it's called Dreamery Soapworks. And all you have to do is ask to join. And I ask you please to join under your personal name and not your business name. This group already kind of got bigger than I thought it would, so if you have a question specifically for me, just tag me, Terry Ensley, and I will try to get to it. If I miss it, just tag me again and ask it again. There's a lot of other extremely talented soap makers on there, so if you just have something you want to ask other soap makers, just ask it and someone will answer you. I'm just curious as to which design you like the best. I have these two, the stripe and the swirl, and then I'm going to include the soap when I raked it through because I thought that was really cool as well. So just let me know in the poll above which one is your favorite. If you appreciate these videos, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe and hit the bell for notifications if you want to be notified next time I post a video. And thank you for watching and have a great day.